The movie opens in a forest where an elderly man is returning home after fishing. Along the way, he discovers a large egg on the ground and approaches it to take a closer look. As he picks it up, suddenly, a hissing sound emanates from nearby. The man then turns around to find a gigantic T-Rex standing behind him. Both of them have a tense stare down, and the old man casually greets the dinosaur. In reply, he gets a loud angry roar. The scene then fast-forwards by 5 years, and we are shown a laboratory situated deep in the forest, where some scientists are conducting research on a crocodile. Turns out they are trying to create a new species of dinosaur by combining the DNAs of both types of creatures. Meanwhile, the head scientist, Richard, enters the experiment room and injects a serum into the crocodile, causing it to behave aggressively. When it starts getting out of control, the scientists have to reluctantly tranquilize it. This frustrates Richard a lot, as he has been trying to create a dinosaur for years, but all his efforts have gone into vain. If he doesn't find a solution soon, his funding will be cut off. In the next scene, some middle school students visit a museum, where they see dinosaur fossils and bones. As the teacher explains about extinction, a curious boy named Chris asks if any relatives of dinosaurs are still alive. In reply, the teacher mentions birds, frogs, and crocodiles as distant relatives. Hearing this, Chris wonders if there might be a large dinosaur still living somewhere. But his classmates laugh at him, except for his friends John and Carrie. After the museum trip, as Chris is returning home with his friends, he notices a shop called World of Wonders. This makes him curious, so he enters the shop. Inside, he meets the owner, who resembles the old man from the beginning of the movie. Initially, the old man assumes Chris to be a normal kid and suggests he go away as there are no toys for him. But when our boy insists on being shown something very strange and appealing, the shopkeeper brings out various antiques. This excites Chris, but he still wants to see something extraordinary. After searching for a while, the old man finally presents a locked box, promising it holds something special. He also makes it clear that he doesn't want money, but only a promise to keep the box safe, which Chris agrees to. Afterward, Chris reaches home, enters his room and secretly opens the box. He finds a large egg, the same one from the start of the movie. Chris then watches several online videos on how to hatch the egg. After gaining enough information, he sets up the right conditions and covers the egg with a blanket before leaving for lunch with his parents. After a while, he returns to his room and patiently waits for the egg to hatch. In just a few minutes, cracks appear on the egg, and a cute little dinosaur emerges from inside. Chris is completely taken aback, as he was under the impression that dinosaurs were extinct. As he tries to touch it, the little creature gets spooked and creates a ruckus inside the room. It breaks everything on its way and eventually hides under the bed. To lure the dinosaur out from there, Chris has an idea. He places some gummy bear candies in front of the bed. At first, the dinosaur doesn't pay much attention, but eventually, the sweet scent tempts it, and it cautiously emerges from its hiding spot. Chris, in a gentle manner, reassures the dinosaur that he means no harm. He starts petting its head, and the dinosaur begins to trust him, playfully exploring the room. It runs over to Chris's reading desk and starts nibbling on his notebooks. Our boy manages to take the notebook away from the dinosaur's mouth and promises to get some proper food for it. Shortly after, when Chris returns from the kitchen, he notices the dinosaur has grown slightly in size. Regardless, he feeds it, and then names it after his favorite scientist, Albert. Following this, they spend some time playing with a ball. Later, when Chris's mom comes to check on him, he quickly hides Albert and pretends to be going to bed. His mother is surprised but eventually leaves his room. The following day, Chris heads to school with Albert, and his friends, John and Carrie, also join him. Chris hopes to keep Albert hidden, but the dinosaur has other plans. It sneaks out from behind Chris and stands in front of his friends. John and Carrie are shocked to see the dinosaur and start asking questions. Left with no choice, Chris shares the incredible story of how he obtained an egg from a store and hatched it into a dinosaur. As the three continue talking, they notice that Albert has grown in size again. Chris then makes the decision to skip school for the day and take Albert to the old man's shop. Unfortunately, when he arrives there, he learns that the name of the shop has changed. It is now being run by an old lady, who claims that she works here alone. Surprised, Chris asks about the old man, and the lady reveals that he is her late husband. He mysteriously died 5 years ago, but the cause was never known. Feeling puzzled, Chris decides to take Albert to the dinosaur museum to learn more about it. Once they reach, he talks to the receptionist and requests to meet the person in charge. In response, she asks him to wait a while and explore the museum until the head of the museum arrives. Eventually, the chief scientist, Richard, arrives at the museum. He is here to collect some more fossil samples to extract dinosaur DNA for his research. While Chris is busy exploring, Albert manages to escape from his bag and starts hopping around the dinosaur fossils on display. A curious girl and her mother notice Albert, but they mistake him for a robotic dinosaur, so there's no chaos. However, Richard spots Albert through a CCTV camera and rushes to capture him for research. A chase unfolds within the museum, with the dinosaur darting around. Chris eventually catches Albert and puts him back in his bag. Unfortunately, as he's about to leave, Richard catches up to them and questions Chris about the bag's contents. Desperate to protect his new friend, Chris runs away without giving an explanation. On the way, as Albert's hunger grows, Chris heads to the supermarket to buy him some food. Unfortunately, inside the store, a dog notices Albert and starts chasing him. Frightened, the dinosaur runs through the store, creating a complete mess. He eventually escapes and hides in the back of a car. Later, the car's owner returns and drives away, completely unaware that Albert is inside. Chris notices this at the last moment but is unable to catch up to the car. Upon reaching home, the car owner discovers Albert, who has now grown in size significantly. Turns out he ate all the food items kept in the trunk of the car. The frightened owner mistakes him for a monster and tries to shoot him, but Albert somehow manages to escape. After a while, the man calls the police and informs them about the dinosaur. They arrive in no time and capture Albert, thinking he's a large lizard. They then contact Richard, who's the reptile expert in town. Chris also notices the cops capturing his friend and follows them to the police station. In the next scene, he reaches the station and finds Albert in a cage, noticeably larger now. As he contemplates on how to help his friend, he meets an old man, bearing a striking resemblance to the one who gave him the egg. The man asks why he's here and Chris explains to him the entire predicament. Surprisingly, the old man promises to help and also advises him to take Albert to a larger space, like the forest. Chris agrees to follow his suggestions but is unsure about how to proceed. Soon, Richard and his team arrive and take Albert away in their van. As they depart, Albert looks back at Chris with a sense of sadness. Once they've left, the old man brings a two-seater buggy car and asks Chris to get in. Together, they set off for the lab in the most unconventional of ways. Along the way, Chris's dad briefly spots him but dismisses it as a hallucination. At the lab, Richard delivers a self-congratulatory speech to his team before taking Albert inside. Meanwhile, Chris and the old man use nitro boosters to reach the lab faster, but they discover the car has no brakes. Attempting to stop it, they decide to use an anchor rope, but the plan fails as they forget to attach the end rope to the car. Finally, the old man manages to stop the car by crashing it into a tree. Afterward, the duo reaches the lab, which is heavily guarded by many security personnel. The old man then suggests Chris to go and find Albert while he distracts the guards. He then approaches them and pretends to perform some magic tricks. Meanwhile, Chris sneaks into the lab and searches around for Albert. After a bit of looking around, he eventually finds Albert locked in a cage. He appears to have grown into a full-sized dinosaur by now. Suddenly, two guards arrive at the scene and prepare to attack Chris. But out of nowhere, the old man also shows up and quickly incapacitates the guards. Chris then takes the keys from one of the fallen guards and frees Albert. However, when they attempt to run out of the place, the chief scientist and his team surround them. Richard orders his men to lock up the trio, but to his dismay, the guards are terrified of Albert's immense size. They simply don't want to go near him. Seeing this, Richard reassures his team not to fear the dinosaur. But at the same time, Albert roars loudly and flees into the forest with Chris and the old man. Desperate to get the dinosaur for research and experiment purposes, Richard and his team follow them, armed with guns. After they reach the heart of the forest, the old man takes Chris and Albert inside a cave to seek refuge. The chief scientist shouts, offering Chris money in exchange for Albert's surrender. But our boy immediately declines, asserting his responsibility to care for Albert. At this moment, the old man convinces Chris that the forest is the safest place for Albert to live happily. He suggests that they should leave him here. Initially, Chris refuses to let his friend go, but after a bit of thinking, he realizes the importance of natural habitat in Albert's life and reluctantly agrees. He then bids farewell to the dinosaur, expressing his love and care. With this, Albert ventures deeper into the forest, while the old man and Chris head out. As soon as they arrive on the main road, Richard and his team surround them, demanding to know Albert's whereabouts. In reply, Chris assures them that Albert is safe and will be living his remaining life freely. Suddenly, a police car arrives, causing Richard and his team to flee. The sheriff then asks Chris and the old man about their destination and offers them a ride to return to the city. In the next scene, the duo sits outside the same shop where Chris got the egg. He expresses his gratitude to the old man for saving his friend. Right then, John and Carrie arrive there, inquiring about Albert's whereabouts. Chris informs them that Albert is gone and turns to introduce them to the old man. However, to his surprise, the old man has vanished. Confused, Chris peers inside the shop and sees the old man raising his hand before slowly fading away. This makes him realize that the old man is a ghost whose main purpose was to save Albert. The movie then ends with Albert's roar echoing through the forest. He is now safe and free, far from all the troubles of the city.
Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on your notification. That really helps my channel. Thanks for watching.